Frederick Bond walked briskly down the sidewalk, heading for the pharmacy. It was unseasonably warm in Chicago for mid-October, and his fine wool topcoat was unbuttoned and swung freely as he walked. Still, gloves felt good. Heavy gray clouds pushed back on the sun's attempts to get the day started, but the city ran on its own schedule. Delivery trucks and vans were starting to fill the streets and alleyways, supplying all manners of produce and products to Chi-town businesses. The quantity of things a person might acquire still fascinated Frederick. He had grown up as a middle child with 10 siblings on a small farm in rural Illinois. They had each other, not things. He might still be there, he reflected, but his world shattered when he was 13 and his 11-year-old sister, Emmy Lou, died of the croup. She had been his friend, his confidant, his favorite. She was pretty in a pale, delicate way, and she was wicked smart. She borrowed books and read aloud to him. She made him read. She made him like it. The following winter, his father left suddenly. Frederick remembered the knot of men milling about, scuffling, a knife, and a huge red-stained patch of dirt in front of the old shed. The sheriff came to the house, and his mother stood at the door of their shack in her cotton shift as the cold blew through the room where they huddled together. That night the snow came hard, covering the shack and the yard. His mother stood at the window and said, more to herself than to the children, "Snow covers the ugly with a blanket of grace." He didn't understand what she meant. He thought it might be from the Bible, but he understood that his father would not be back. He left soon after that. Loud clanging filled the air as a trolley stopped a half-block ahead of Frederick and discharged the early birds, the openers. He was one of them, arriving early, bracing for a busy day. He shivered involuntarily. What had prompted thoughts that felt like premonitions? It was natural, he told himself, to be nervous about a new venture. His nerves, coupled with the unusual weather and the increased scope of business, had triggered unbidden memories from long ago. He needed to focus. He was expecting deliveries today, legal and otherwise. Both Andrew and Dorothy would be coming in to help. Frederick unlocked the front door of the pharmacy. He made his way through the store to his private office, hung up his coat and hat, then grabbed a broom and cleaning cloths from the small utility closet. He unlocked the door to the Cairo suite and started cleaning. The physical act of sweeping the floor calmed him. Just 2 years before, he had been sweeping the floors in the Marigold room, dragging huge blocks of ice upstairs into the bar service area and polishing glassware for the bartenders. A bar boy with few prospects. And now here he was, appropriately licensed and fully prepared to exploit the multiple opportunities provided by the increasingly unpopular Volstead Act.
Frederick's first office was not far from this one. It had been cramped with just enough room for a tiny waiting area and a small treatment room. Chiropractic training had cost him 2 weeks and $150. That included a diploma, a treatment table, a book, and a wall chart. It also included tips on how to hard sell people and advice to refer really sick people to real doctors. There was no license required, but suddenly you were Dr. Bond. He got lucky, he reflected, when Mrs. Algernon Hart had walked into that small office one morning, accompanied by her niece, Dorothy Louise. Mrs. Hart was a wealthy widow whose inheritance included 3 houses, several commercial buildings, and a lot of railroad stock. Dorothy Louise lived with her grandmother. She was rebellious and had the morals of a very pretty alley cat. Her grandmother disapproved of her conduct but spoiled her, trying to compensate for the accident years ago that had taken both her parents. Mrs. Hart was referred to Frederick Bond, D.C., by one of his former patients. She suffered from aches that responded well to Dr. Bond's soft tissue manipulations, spinal adjustments, and heat therapy. His personal charm, good looks, and willingness to listen pleased her. Dorothy Louise returned later without her grandmother, a rather cheeky move for a young woman of the day, and Frederick correctly diagnosed and treated her malady with a nice dinner that evening and a special treatment session in the bedroom of his home.
She rather liked him and let him call her Dot when they were alone. Dorothy Louise found most of the men she knew shallow and foolish. Frederick was different. She listened raptly to his plans and was intrigued to learn that he would be, in 4 short months, a fully licensed pharmacist. It was her enthusiasm that got him this very desirable 6-room suite from her grandmother at a special family and friends rate. Dorothy Louise dressed like the heiress she was, but she could act like a cheap floozy. Frederick was pretty certain she just needed attention and thought that she might revert to her roots if she had a purpose in life beyond wearing the latest fashions. He was beginning to think that marrying her might be a good thing for both of them. The front doorbell jingled. Frederick started. The pharmacy did not open for another hour, and he thought he had locked the door behind him when he came in. The store was warming up, and street corner Tom, having just filled the newspaper racks on the sidewalk corner outside, had probably come in to escape the chill for just a moment. Frederick greeted him. "Good morning, Street. How's it going today?"
"I'm good, Doc," replied the newsboy. Street was tall and lanky, about 20 years old, with sandy brown hair and a thin face. He seemed serious for such a young man, but he was always pleasant and was respected on the street for his hard work. "One for you," he said as he turned to leave, indicating a copy of the Chicago Daily Tribune folded in half and lying on the soda fountain counter. "Much obliged," replied Frederick. Street left the shop, the bell jingling again. Frederick checked the time and decided to just leave the door unlocked. He propped the broom against the wall and piled cleaning supplies on top of the pharmacy counter. He was leave the main store cleaning to Andrew. He moved behind the counter and leaned over the newspaper. Large headlines caught his attention. Tuesday, October 16, 1923. St. Louis reporter exposes medical license mail. Arrests pending per DA. Center front and above the fold was a picture of Dr. Ralph, the man who had guided him out of the Marigold room and made him the chiropractor and the pharmacist he was today. The story covered the entire first page. Apparently, it had debuted yesterday in St. Louis and was being picked up by newspapers nationwide. Everyone was going to know about this. Frederick was horrified. He skimmed the page. There was a detailed account of how the reporter for the St. Louis Star and Times, posing as a coal salesman with no high school diploma, had received a high school diploma, a chiropractic license, and a medical degree with a Missouri medical license in less than a few months and for less than $1,000. For a moment, greed trumped fear. It had taken him almost 2.5 years to achieve the same path, with the difference being a pharmacy license instead of a medical license. Had they swindled him? He had paid $100 for a high school diploma, then $150 for 2 weeks of chiropractic training, and a year at college cost well over $1,000. Arrests expected soon. Fear returned and was mixed with apprehension. Frederick's gut tightened and he thought he might throw up. Dr. Ralph, Dr. Alexander, and Professor Sachs were all mentioned by name. 3 men, up until now distinguished in their communities, were in serious trouble. 3 men whom he had served many times in the Marigold room. Smart, prescient men who had correctly predicted the effects of the Volstead Act before it was passed, and who had offered him a way to a prosperous future when his dreams of being head bartender at the Marigold room were crushed as newly enacted federal law closed bars.